Before the secrets, before the blood, and before the ultimate betrayal, there was only the smell of lukewarm coffee and desperation. Anya Johnson just needed $3,000 for her sister's tuition. What she got was a debt to a monster, a family history drenched in the dark money of St. Petersburg, and a revelation that would destroy every truth she thought she knew. You're about to hear the story of a waitress, a mafia boss, and a terrifying family secret that was hidden in plain sight. Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and prepare to go deep into the underworld of Jersey City and the Bronx. Because once you hear how this story ends, you won't look at your own family the same way again. The fluorescent lights of the Golden Fork Diner, nestled precariously between a booming tech startup and a dilapidated warehouse district in Jersey City, New Jersey, were cold and unforgiving. They failed to warm the atmosphere, leaving everything bathed in a sickly, anxious glow. Outside, the distant shimmer of Manhattan's wealth mocked the working class struggling just across the river. Anya Johnson moved like a ghost, her practiced efficiency born of necessity. Beneath her uniform, a current of quiet panic ran. Rent on her tiny apartment in the Bronx was 3 weeks late. More pressing, her younger sister, Maya, was facing an uphill battle getting into her dream HBCU in Atlanta without a significant and currently non-existent down payment. Every late-night shift was a quiet prayer for a miracle. But tonight, the dread wasn't quiet. It sat at booth 7. This was Marcus the Lion Thorne. He wasn't just wealthy. His presence was a heavy, suffocating thing. Thorne was the whispered name in every New York and New Jersey precinct, the feared successor to the Russian syndicate, a man who built his empire on imports and intimidation. His tailored Italian suit and cold, unblinking focus were utterly out of place against the worn laminate of the booth. Anya approached, notepad in hand, foreseeing the professional, neutral mask she wore every night. Thorne's simple order, a black coffee, was delivered with a smirk that felt less like appreciation and more like a threat. "Excuse me, Anya." Thorne began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble with an accent that was vaguely European but undeniably menacing. He didn't look at her name tag. He knew. "I've been watching you. You're efficient, professional, and clearly hiding something." Anya's grip tightened on her pen. "Just trying to get through my shift, sir. Is there anything else I can get you?" Thorne leaned back, the worn leather booth groaning in protest. He slid a thick, secured roll of $100 bills across the table. "I'll give you $3,000 if you serve me in Russian," laughed the mafia boss at the black waitress. The diner noise seemed to evaporate. His entourage, 3 massive bodyguards who looked like retired linebackers, snickered. The challenge wasn't just linguistic. It was an act of deliberate public humiliation, designed to expose her or break her. But the $3,000 was a siren call for Anya. It was Maya's tuition deposit. It was the solution to her endless struggle. She knew Russian. She hadn't spoken it in years, not since her mother died. But desperate necessity won, and the polite mask finally broke. Anya stood taller, her desperation hardened into courageous defiance. She met Marcus Thorne's gaze, a small, subtle act that stunned his entire entourage into absolute silence. The moment was hers, a brief, intoxicating sense of control in a life ruled by debt and uncertainty. «Вы уверены, что хотите пойти на этот риск, мистер Торн?» She replied, her voice carrying an authentic, unaccented St. Petersburg lilt that belonged nowhere near the Jersey diner. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Thorne's arrogant smile evaporated. His jaw hardened, the predatory amusement replaced by a terrifyingly sharp, focused calculation. His 3 hulking bodyguards shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between their boss and the black waitress who had just dismantled his public display of power. This was the immediate payoff, the moment the underdog flips the script and earns the audience's loyalty, guaranteeing they stick around for the consequences. "My sincerest apologies, Anya," he said, switching back to English, the mockery gone, replaced by a chilling, lethal seriousness. That accent, it's perfect. It belongs to the old money of the motherland. Where did a waitress in Jersey City pick up a dialect from St. Petersburg? He didn't wait for an answer. He knew the question itself was the new weapon. He picked up his coffee cup, turned it slowly in his massive hand, and tapped the rim twice with a silver ring. The soft sound was deafening. The challenge was over, and the game had escalated. The $3,000 was no longer a reward. It was a bribe for a far more dangerous role. Anya felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, heavier than the debt she carried. She hadn't just proven a skill. She had exposed a secret she'd spent years burying. Her mother's silent warnings about the language, about the past, echoed in her mind. She had won a battle only to be drafted into a war. Thorne leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers, no longer seeing a desperate waitress, but a valuable, damaged asset. That was more than just good Russian, Anya. That was the dialect of Dmitry Volkov's inner circle, the kind of language you only learn if you live it, if you breathe it. He knew. He didn't just know she spoke the language, he knew who had taught her. The message was clear. The public game was over, and a far more dangerous one was beginning, one rooted in a history she thought she had escaped when she moved to the Bronx. The challenge was no longer for $3,000, it was for her freedom. Marcus Thorne motioned for his men to disperse slightly, granting a false sense of privacy in the brightly lit diner. The men retreated, but their presence and the threat they represented still hung in the air like ozone before a storm. Thorne's expression was intense, no longer arrogant, but focused on acquisition. "I need a translator, Anya. Not for menus, but for secrets. Be at the Horizon Towers penthouse tomorrow at noon." The $3,000 is yours, along with a proposition for a much larger sum. I'm offering a permanent role, Anya, a cultural consultant for my international interests. His voice was low, conspiratorial, making the criminal proposition sound like a prestigious corporate headhunt. Anya swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. The money was life-changing, enough to pull her sister, Maya, out of the financial quicksand and into Atlanta. But the man was a known criminal. His interests were built on intimidation and blood. She tried to cling to her old life, the lie that protected her. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Thorne. I don't—" He cut her off with a low chuckle, a sound devoid of warmth. "You are many things, Anya, but just a waitress is not one of them. You've earned the money. Now you're going to earn your future." He stood, his height and menace dominating the small booth. "This is a one-time offer for a talent that cannot be replicated. I need your Russian, and I need your silence. Don't be late." He slid the money toward her, and just as her trembling fingers reached for the banded bills, he placed his large, heavy hand on hers. His touch sent a cold current up her arm, a possessive gesture that claimed her, body and mind, before she even accepted the offer. "It seems you and I share more than just a passing knowledge of Russian. It seems we share a debt to the past." The final phrase was whispered, a hook that shifted the entire confrontation from a simple bet to a deep, dangerous destiny. The weight of his words implied he knew exactly what debt, whose debt, and why she was the one being called to repay it. As Thorne finally released her hand and walked away, flanked by his suddenly silent security detail, Anya stared at the $3,000. It felt less like a reward and more like a heavy chain binding her to the dark heritage she'd spent her life trying to escape. Her brief victory had instantly turned into her lifelong trap. She had won the battle for tuition, but she had just lost the war for her soul. The following day, Anya Johnson stepped into the gleaming lobby of Horizon Towers, a fortress of glass and steel that looked across the Hudson River to the glittering, mocking promise of Manhattan. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending into a different, untouchable world, Marcus Thorne's world. With every floor, Anya felt her own reality slipping further away. His corner office was a masterpiece of minimalist luxury, adorned with abstract art and dark, polished wood. But the true masterpiece was the floor-to-ceiling view of the entire tri-state area, which felt less like a workspace and more like a conqueror's throne room. The sheer scale of the operation hinted at a power that dwarfed local street crime. Thorne was waiting. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore black trousers and a cashmere sweater, a quiet look of lethal concentration. He was all business, laying out the terms, an astronomical salary, enough to solve all her family's debt problems in a month and secure Maya's future forever. The sole requirement, he stressed, was a promise that her role was purely linguistic, translating sensitive meetings with his high-level Russian contacts. "My mother was a translator for the UN," Anya lied smoothly, attempting to create a safe, legitimate cover story. Her voice was steady, her expression neutral. "I grew up with the language, moving between embassies." She maintained eye contact, believing her fabrication was flawless, a perfect shield against the truth he sought. Thorne only offered a slow, genuine, unnerving smile, a smile that never reached his cold eyes. He walked to the window, watching the tugboats on the river below, seemingly engrossed by the insignificance of the world outside his penthouse. The silence stretched, cold and heavy, amplified by the office's size. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, desperate drumbeat. Every second of silence felt like a direct, personal interrogation. She was desperate to know if he believed her, desperate to know if the lie would hold. He finally spoke, not turning from the window, his voice quiet. "Anya, the UN, a fine organization, but your accent, that St. Petersburg cadence, that kind of finesse isn't learned in a conference room. It's inherited." His smile faded completely. He knew, and his next words would shatter her careful facade. Marcus Thorne finally turned from the panoramic view, his eyes piercing Anya Johnson's desperate lie with terrifying ease. The silence he had manufactured broke with a chilling finality. "I know who your mother was, Anya," he stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "She wasn't a translator for the UN. Your father was Dmitry Volkov." The first major plot twist hit Anya like a physical blow. The air rushed out of her lungs, replaced by a cold, searing shock. Dmitry Volkov, the name her mother had forbidden her to speak, the ghost that had haunted her childhood, the truth, long suspected in the darkest corners of her mind, was suddenly a blinding, terrifying reality. Thorne continued, relentless, walking slowly back toward the desk. Volkov was one of the most feared enforcers for the Solnsevska Brotherhood back in the 90s, a brutal man with a silver tongue. He disappeared from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, 18 years ago. The entire Russian underworld thought he was dead, but I never did. Anya wasn't just a gifted waitress struggling in Jersey City. She was the secret daughter of a legendary missing mafia enforcer. Her flawless fluency wasn't from a classroom. It was her hidden, dark heritage, a language whispered in safe rooms and coded in fear. Her mother hadn't taught her Russian to make her smart. She had taught her to forget it to keep her and her sister Maya safe. Thorne leaned across the desk, his massive frame intimidating even when seated. "Your father, Dmitry, was a thief. He stole something invaluable before he vanished. A ledger, a key, an encrypted drive. Something so powerful, so damning that its existence is denied even by the Brotherhood itself. Something only Dmitry knew the location of." Thorne believed Anya's return to the language was the key to finding it. The $3,000 bet in the diner was never about her ability to serve. It was a deliberate, pre-arranged signal to the underground, confirming that Volkov's blood and Volkov's tongue had surfaced in the New York area. "You're not just translating for me, Anya," he concluded, his eyes hard, cold, and utterly demanding. "The ledger can either destroy me and everyone associated with me, including you and your family, or it can be used to ensure your sister's college education for the next century. I will provide for Maya for life. I will protect you both. In exchange, you become my ears, my eyes, and my weapon." Trapped by her past, bound by her mother's desperate silence, and motivated by her love for Maya, Anya had no choice. She was no longer a waitress. She was the reluctant spy, now fully enrolled in the dangerous, bloody history she had tried so hard to outrun. The price of her sister's future was the theft of her own soul. Weeks turned into months. Anya Johnson's life was a dangerous, dizzying blur. Luxury cars, private jets, and tense late-night meetings. She expertly navigated the criminal landscape, using her inherited Russian to manipulate negotiations and gain Marcus Thorne's trust. The salary was massive, the money poured in, and most importantly, her sister Maya's future was secured. But the moral cost was a constant, dull ache. It was a cancer on her conscience. Anya quickly realized the terrifying depth of the world she'd entered. She was no longer just translating words. She was translating threats, lies, and power plays, sometimes choosing which nuanced phrase might save a life or condemn a man. She began to see the unsettling complexities in Thorne. The cold, calculating boss was also capable of rare, quiet moments of unexpected poetry when discussing Russian history. This complication made him terrifyingly human and made her job infinitely more confusing. She started to recognize the subtle difference between his business voice and the one he used when momentarily dropping his guard. The line between victim and accomplice, observer and participant was blurring with every passing day. However, the longer she stayed embedded in the organization, the more she noticed a destructive pattern. Thorne's operation was being systematically and surgically targeted. Critical shipments were seized in the port of Baltimore, large sums of money were intercepted during transfers in Chicago, and his trusted contacts were disappearing without a trace. The organization was bleeding, not from external attacks, but from internal wounds. Someone was dismantling Thorne's empire, and they were doing it with intimate internal knowledge. The mole wasn't a rival gang. It was someone inside the inner circle, someone with access to schedules and logistics. Anya felt the pressure mounting. If Thorne fell, she would fall with him, and the promise of Maya's security would vanish. She had to find the source of the leak, not just for Thorne, but for her own survival, before the betrayal consumed them all. The suspicion of a mole quickly became an obsession for Anya Johnson. She couldn't trust Marcus Thorne's men, and she certainly couldn't trust the boss himself. But she had to find the source of the leak to secure her own survival and Maya's future. One night, while translating a sensitive financial document in Thorne's sprawling study, a room as large as her old Bronx apartment, Anya felt the familiar paranoia nagging at her. She ran her hand along the built-in bookshelves and noticed a slight discoloration in the mahogany paneling behind a heavy volume of Russian poetry. Her heart pounding, she pressed the spot. The paneling, engineered for silent discretion, slid back with a soft, expensive click, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment. Thorne's hidden space wasn't for weapons. It was for secrets. Anya held her breath, expecting the ledger or the encrypted drive that sealed her fate. But inside, there was neither. There was only a single, faded, creased photograph. It was a picture of her father, Dmitry Volkov, taken decades ago. He was young, smiling, and standing with 3 other men. They were posing in front of a Brighton Beach, Brooklyn restaurant sign, their arms slung around each other like brothers. A quartet bound by shared history and, Anya now knew, shared crime. She recognized 2 of the men instantly. They were Thorne's top lieutenants, the very men who had been at the Golden Fork Diner on her first night. They were the men Thorne trusted with his life, the bedrock of his organization, and they were the internal threat. But that realization was overshadowed by the figure of the 3rd man. Her breath hitched. Cold terror replaced rational thought as her gaze fell on him. His face was slightly blurred by time and the elements, but the man's familiar posture and the warmth in his eyes were unmistakable. This was the man whose arm was slung around her father like a protector, the man who was clearly part of the Volkov inner circle. This man was not some shadowy gangster from the past. He was the constant in Anya's turbulent life, the figure of stability and goodness, the only man who had ever truly looked out for her and her sister. He was the one who had moved them to Jersey City, who paid the bills, the man who was now exposed as a liar and an operative. Anya stared at the photograph, the paper trembling in her grasp, realizing that the mole wasn't some stranger. The mole was family. The mole was Uncle Kevin. The third man in the faded photograph was Uncle Kevin. The second major plot twist delivered a crushing, physical, emotional blow. Anya Johnson gasped, stumbling back from the compartment, the photograph falling from her numb fingers. Uncle Kevin, the kind, quiet man who ran a modest community center in Newark, the man who had moved her family from the Bronx to Jersey City, who paid the bills, who was the single figure of stability and goodness in her tumultuous life. Her entire foundation of trust, love, and family instantly shattered into icy, sharp pieces. Anya stared at the photo, the world tilting violently. Kevin wasn't just family, he was part of her father's criminal past. And given the systematic sabotage that was crippling Marcus Thorne's operation, the seized shipments, the intercepted money, he wasn't just an old friend, he was actively involved. He was either one of the men who had betrayed Dmitry Volkov 18 years ago, or, impossibly, the one orchestrating the slow surgical collapse of Thorne's empire today. The full, horrifying realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Kevin had been watching her entire life. He hadn't just settled them in Jersey City to be safe. He had been waiting patiently for the moment her desperation, her inherited linguistic talent, or her true identity would surface. He had been waiting for the moment she would lead him to her father's secret, not to protect her or her sister Maya, but to complete a 20-year mission. Every kindness, every reassurance, every dollar he gave her was not love, but a carefully deployed component of an elaborate, long-game trap. Anya didn't need Thorne's files to confirm it. Kevin had known exactly when she was struggling with Maya's tuition. He knew the specific desperation that would drive her to take the job at the Golden Fork. He had been the silent watcher, manipulating the narrative of her life until she was forced to speak the language that would signal her availability to the entire underworld. Anya grabbed Thorne's security tablet from his desk, her hands shaking, and scrolled through the encrypted surveillance logs. There it was. 3 months ago, a detailed, anonymous report was sent to a secure international server detailing the specific vulnerabilities of Thorne's logistics network, the same network bleeding out in Baltimore and Chicago. The digital breadcrumbs led to a burner phone purchased in Newark, close to Kevin's community center. The evidence was irrefutable. The man she trusted most, the man who paid for her mother's funeral and gave her Maya's brecche money, was the one who set the final, devastating trap. He wasn't just a simple traitor, he was a deep-cover operative, either a rival criminal who had been playing the long game of vengeance, or, far worse, a federal agent with intimate, damning history in the Russian underground. Her entire life had been a carefully managed illusion, and she was now just minutes away from becoming the final sacrificial pawn. She had to act now, before Kevin's mission was complete, and she was left holding the wreckage. A major, last-ditch deal was set for a high-roller Nevada casino on the outskirts of Las Vegas. It was a massive, high-stakes transfer of assets and influence, a move Marcus Thorne believed would stabilize his entire business after the recent crippling leaks orchestrated by the mole. But for Anya Johnson, standing amidst the glittering, tasteless opulence, it felt less like a business negotiation and more like the final, doomed act of a tragedy. She was utterly isolated. She couldn't trust Thorne, who was using her to find a devastating secret that would cement his criminal power. But she certainly couldn't trust Uncle Kevin, the man who had built his life on a calculated lie to use her to destroy Thorne. Anya wasn't a translator anymore. She was a terrified pawn caught between two powerful, violent men, both claiming to act in the name of her protection. Anya knew the entire deal was a trap. The confidence radiating from Thorne's remaining lieutenants felt brittle and forced. They were too exposed, too assured, suggesting they were being led like lambs to the slaughter. Her heart hammered with the chilling, undeniable certainty that this was where the internal betrayer, Kevin, would make his final, decisive move. The lavish decorations of the casino, the synthetic sound of the slot machines, and the clinking of cheap champagne glasses formed a grating, surreal soundtrack to her impending doom. As Thorne gave her his final instructions, his voice low and commanding, Anya excused herself to the powder room. There, with shaking hands, she slipped the faded photograph of her father and Kevin into the lining of her gown. It was her only insurance policy, proof of the conspiracy, and the only weapon she had against the two men controlling her fate. When she returned to the floor, the transfer was beginning. The air in the opulent casino was thick with dread, masked only by the flashing lights. Anya stood near Thorne, translating the coded Russian that flowed between him and the potential buyers, every word a step closer to the inevitable explosion. She glanced at the faces in the crowd, searching for a sign of Kevin, but saw only strangers. She knew he wouldn't be visible. He was the silent watcher, the man who moved the pieces from the shadows. The trap was sprung, and Anya was standing right in the center of the kill zone. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, taking a single, silent breath, preparing for the gunfire she knew was only moments away. The high-stakes deal began smoothly, the precise, aristocratic Russian words flowing from Anya Johnson's lips as she translated Marcus Thorne's final commands to the buyers. Every word was measured, every phrase designed to convey absolute control. Then the silence broke, not with a standard siren, but with a deep, subsonic electronic sound that signaled a tactical lockdown, the casino's high-tech defenses seizing the exits. Seconds later, federal agents in body armor burst through the main doors, shouting commands that were instantly drowned out by the screams of high-roller patrons. The casino floor erupted in pure, unadulterated chaos. But the most terrifying sound wasn't the agents. It was the sharp, immediate exchange of gunfire between Thorne's own security detail, confirming the devastating internal betrayal. The mole's work had been completed. Anya and Thorne were instantly separated in the crush of bodies and overturned tables. Anya, fueled by pure adrenaline and survival instinct, dove headfirst behind a bank of glittering slot machines. The metallic sound of bullets ricocheting off the glass cases was deafening. Through the swirling dust and strobe of emergency lights, she saw Thorne grappling with one of his own lieutenants, the betrayal immediate and visceral, brother against brother. Ignoring the piercing pain in her knees and elbows, she scrambled toward the service corridors. She knew this was the end of the line for everyone present, but she had to get out. She didn't belong to either Thorne or Uncle Kevin. She belonged to Maya. She needed to live to protect her sister. With a desperate lunge, she reached the dimly lit corridor, her torn evening gown snagging on a broken utility cart. She pressed her hand to her chest, reassuring herself that the faded photograph, the only piece of evidence that proved the conspiracy and the key to her freedom, was still tucked into the lining of her dress. The sounds of the battle faded behind the heavy fire door, replaced by the pounding desperation in her own ears. A final, heavy metal door groaned open. She burst out into the alley, gasping for the cool, dry Nevada night air. Her lungs burned, her dress was ruined, and her whole world felt like a violent, collapsing lie. She was free, but utterly alone. And she knew the silence wouldn't last. She had information that could destroy two powerful forces, and one of them was already waiting in the shadows. Anya Johnson didn't look back. She ran, her adrenaline-fueled escape a desperate primal urge for survival. Her ruined heels clicked and scraped against the alley asphalt, the rhythmic sound quickly being swallowed by the rising howl of sirens, the distant, ominous call of the Las Vegas Strip closing in. She knew she couldn't outrun the police, and she definitely couldn't outrun Marcus Thorne's remaining, vengeful survivors. She was exposed, terrified, and utterly alone. And just as she felt her legs finally giving out, her lungs screaming for air, a massive, black, unmarked sedan screeched to a halt beside her, tires smoking against the pavement. The sudden appearance was violent, forcing Anya to stumble against the alley wall. The driver's door swung open with a heavy thud. Anya froze, her hands instinctively raised in a defensive posture, ready to fight, scream, or finally surrender. Her wide eyes struggled to pierce the smoke and the shadows thrown by the car's headlights, trying to identify her captor. Every nerve ending screamed danger. It wasn't one of Thorne's heavily armed men. It wasn't the police. It was Uncle Kevin. A breath hitched in Anya's throat, a complex sound of shock, betrayal, and a sickening sense of inevitability. He was clad in civilian clothes, but over his shirt he wore a black bulletproof vest, transforming her familiar, comforting uncle into a figure of quiet, hardened authority. A laminated FBI badge dangled from a chain around his neck, reflecting the red emergency lights. His face, normally so warm and kind, was now etched with a cold, professional exhaustion, his eyes focused not on her, but on the escape route. The silent watcher was finally and irrefutably revealed. The devastation of the betrayal was worse than any gunshot. It confirmed the horrifying truth she discovered in Thorne's study. Her entire life, from the apartment in the Bronx to her current flight in Nevada, had been an illusion, a controlled experiment managed by the one person she trusted. Kevin wasn't a mole for a rival gang. He was a law enforcement operative who had played the deepest, cruelest game of all. "Get in, Anya," he commanded, his voice devoid of the uncle's affection, replaced by the chilling, undeniable authority of an agent. He didn't ask, he ordered. His hand reached across the console, not for comfort, but for control. "It's over. Thorne is arrested and the Bureau finally has what they need." Anya stared at him, unable to move, unable to breathe. The truth was worse than the lie. She had run from a monster only to be caught by the man who had pretended to be her savior. "Get in, Anya," Uncle Kevin commanded, his voice stripped bare of the uncle's warmth, replaced by the chilling, professional authority of an agent. He stepped fully out of the black sedan, the FBI badge catching the flickering emergency lights. "It's over. Thorne is arrested and the Bureau finally has what they need." Anya didn't move. She stood her ground in the alley, her feet rooted to the cold Nevada pavement, the dust and the chaos settling around her. She didn't care about the sirens or the arrest. She cared about the 18 years of lies he had woven around her life. She held up the faded photograph, the image of the 4 smiling men, now a devastating portrait of betrayal. "You were there when my father disappeared," she accused, her voice raw and shaking with adrenaline and pain. "You were there on Brighton Beach when the Brotherhood started, and you were at the Golden Fork Diner waiting for me to speak Russian. Who are you really, Uncle Kevin? And what did he steal?" Kevin sighed, his eyes scanning the chaos erupting back at the casino, his attention torn between his emotional failure and his professional duty. The exhaustion etched on his face looked genuine, but Anya knew now that regret didn't negate betrayal. "I'm the one who kept you and Maya safe for 18 years, Anya. Every bill, every tuition payment, every Christmas gift, it was all from the Bureau. We needed you to lead us to the secret Thorne was hunting." He took a careful step toward her, holding his hands open, palms up. "Your father, Dmitri, wasn't just an enforcer. He was a ruthless man, yes, but he was also planning his final exit. He was going to expose the entire Solnetsevska Brotherhood after he made his final move. Thorne and his partners cut him out, believing they took everything. They thought they'd cornered him and killed him. But Dmitri had one final card to play." Anya watched him, tears finally mixing with the grime on her face. She managed to whisper, "What card?" Kevin shook his head, a gesture of profound sadness. "The FBI thought it was a ledger. Thorne thought it was gold. But Dmitri was smarter than all of us. He knew money could be replaced, but a direct threat to Thorne's future, that was leverage." He lowered his voice, the sirens momentarily receding. "When your father disappeared, he created the perfect storm, using his disappearance to dismantle their operations, and he stole the one thing that could ever truly break Marcus Thorne's spirit, the thing that would ensure Thorne would spend the rest of his life searching, never consolidating his power. It's the truth you've been searching for, Anya, and it changes everything about this organization, about your father, and about the man who just tried to kill you." He motioned urgently toward the car. "We have to go. They'll know I've broken cover, and they'll come for both of us now." He was offering her the chance to escape, to trade one secret for another, but the weight of the last revelation was about to be dropped. Thank you for watching. The betrayal runs deeper than we ever imagined. The mafia boss, Marcus Thorne, wasn't hunting a ledger. He was hunting his own missing son, a child hidden by the man who betrayed him, Anya's own father, Dmitri Volkov. And now, Anya Johnson holds the key to the most dangerous secret in the Russian underworld. What will Anya do next? Will she expose her Uncle Kevin? Will she help Thorne find his son? Or will she disappear with the truth? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to help us uncover more secrets. And tell us where in the world you are watching from. Your support is what keeps these stories coming.
We'll see you in the next chapter.